Welcome everybody to another VSG Oceanside chat. For those of you who don't know who VSG is, or who we are USC Viterbi's incubator in Marina del Rey. It's an in-person program. It's a whole year long. Early stage tech startups get to come and stay with us in a beautiful office space, and we provide them resources to help them grow. Some of those resources are internal, some of them are general public resources. The Oceanside chat that we're all at now is one of those public resources. It's my honor to introduce Steve Kazan for a second time. He's come and spoke with us once before. I will definitely drop his previous video in the chat so you can see his previous presentation along with a library of all of our Oceanside chats that have been recorded. Steve is going to talk today a bit about partnerships, which I have to tell you from an early stage standpoint, in my experience with teams, is such an under discussed topic, but it's such a huge element in how to survive in the earliest stages of development. So I'm hoping this will be a very useful chat for everyone. I'm going to let Steve lean into his bio for all of you. And I just want to say thanks for being with us, Steve.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, it feels like just yesterday I was on this call, but when I look back through my calendar, a lot's happened since I was here but last. And so what I tried to do was to update the content with the things that have changed. And the big thing that has changed really is the whole access to AI functionality. So we're going to look at how you might use those tools in building the partnerships to help your business succeed. You're founders of companies getting off the ground, trying to figure out how to move forward. It turns out that I am too. So you and I are in the same boat. My background is in partners work for technology companies. I started at large companies and then went to smaller and smaller companies. And then about 3 years ago, started a small company, small consulting firm called Inner Onion. And Inner Onion provides sales, marketing, lead generation advice to emerging companies. And we started out doing international companies that are coming to the United States. But now we're about, I guess, 50-50 in terms of US versus international. And a lot of what we do has to do with building partnership strategies, programs, and campaigns for clients. And they use those campaigns for a couple different reasons. So yes, they want to increase their sales, but strategically they want to increase their visibility. They want to increase their credibility, and working with partners is a great way to do that. The other things that have changed in the year is now the two little companies I'm working with partners, and when I say partners, I mean co-founders. One of them is an AI company using custom GPTs for a specific vertical market. And that's been really interesting because the technology keeps changing. So we started with OpenAI and ChatGPT creating custom GPTs, but we need to be flexible and be able to move to different LLMs. And so as part of our getting going and ramping, we're including partnerships on our very first release of our webpage and our very first launch out to the market. And so we've got partner strategy, we've got partners already signed up, and they're going to help us provide better service to their clients in terms of development, AI development, but also for us, giving us access to various leads. So, my background is across lots of different technologies, but mainly on the business side, sales and marketing sides. And I do have visibility in countries around the globe. So I know that some of your students are, international folks too. So that's a little bit about about my background. But one little story. So um, on my father's side, their my grandfather and his brother, A.E. Joe Kazan, came over from Istanbul to Berlin and then landed in New York City through Ellis Island. And my great uncle, granduncle, Joe was actually written up in the New Yorker magazine, and he wrote a business book. And this business book is about 50 pages long. And he took a box to Macy's in downtown Manhattan and walked in, and somehow or other, he convinced them to sell his book. And so Macy's put his book on their shelves, and it turned out they tried to sell it, but no luck. And so they returned boxes and boxes of books to Joe Kazan. And my dad ended up with a whole box of these books, and a few of them survived. And they're full of old world and new world wit and wisdom. And it's really sort of interesting to look back at the business advice that old AE came up with and how much of it is still relevant today, about being straightforward and being honest and being trustworthy with your clients, your customers, and whoever it is you're dealing with. So people ask, how did Inner Onion get started? Where did the name come from and all that? And part of it came from our buddy old AE. All right, so let's set the scene a little bit. The one thing I'd like to recommend is Joseph Benjamin's book. And Joe, how I discovered Joe was on one of these luncheon webinars. I was looking through the old files, and he did a presentation on your first sales. Like, how do you get your first 5 sales, your first 10, your first 20 sales? And he has a really good formula. So this particular book is available online. It's available as a PDF file. And it's about 50, 60 pages long, but I highly, highly, highly recommend it for any of you having to sell, whether it's your first unit or your 100th or your 300th. He is really good at structuring sales processes and sales messages. So there's my pitch for Joe. When you have referenceable accounts, like your first 5, your first 10, they really have to be fans. They have to be passionate. They have to be your champions. They have to be willing to do case studies and audios and testimonials, right? So once you get past that, then the question is, okay, so how do you expand your market from that position, right? And to set up a partner process, you have to step back and come up with the strategy, right, to start. And maybe these things are accurate from the get-go, and maybe they're not, because maybe you don't have enough information. So maybe your goals in setting up this partner process have to do with researching the market, um, having discovery questions, having, partners as a focus group for you to provide you information on things like competitors, things like pricing, things like, um, uh, what the market behavior looks like. And so what I find with clients is quite often early stage where they're trying to figure out their product market fit, getting feedback, not just from customers, but also from potential partners. And those partners could be reseller partners, channel partners. They could also be consultants or influencers. But all of those various audiences can provide really useful information early in the process. Again, when you're just defining what your product looks like and how you're going to take it to market. But the process is relatively straightforward, right? You have to come up with kind of a hypothesis of who your ideal customer is. And maybe you know that, maybe you're pretty confident. And that once you know your ideal customer profile, your ICP, then the next question is, okay, so what is your ideal partner profile? And what types of partners would be your ideal partner profiles? And from there, than using tools like LinkedIn, which we'll talk about, going out and finding some of those partners, having those conversations with those partners, and you know, creating that valuable information, which then gets documented, becomes part of your overall strategy, and even gets presented to your potential investors, right? To show that you've done your homework, you've done your research, um, and you know that the depth and scope of your various markets. Um, Again, not just for end customers, but also the whole overall ecosystem of those markets, including, um, you know, the partners that are out there. Now, if you're a SaaS company, or you're a technology hardware company, or really any sort of business to business company, the partners that you're going to be dealing with are going to be looking for professional services. And so you want to be able to structure your business and structure your messaging around what's in it for them, and being able to explain your professional services or your support services model becomes very important as you know, bring your product to market and as you talk to various partners. All right, so with a little company, you know, you're just getting going. Maybe you have a fantastic product, but no one's ever heard of you. And so to generate that interest, you have to be able to prove to new customers or new prospects that you have credibility. And one of the ways to do that is by partnering, and typically partnering with larger organizations, partnering with companies that have brand names. Um, if you can get those partnerships going and underway, and you can get them you know, listed on your website, immediately your company becomes not just, you know, one or two or five people, you know, operating from a garage on the beach, but it becomes much more of a credible and real company. So a lot of people I work with, they say, yes, I want leads, you know, I want, you know, access to customers. But I try to tell them to think more broadly, right, and more strategically. And this is true, you know, for partners, and it's also true for investors, right? People will take money from larger, more well-known investors just to establish that credibility with the investors. Um, and the same is true, of course, with the partner world. Some partners, you know, have global reach and global brands, but it's hard to crack in with them. It takes full-time people. It takes, you know, daily working with those large companies. Um, so if you're going to go that route, if that's part of your strategy, you know, you just need to be prepared, and you need to have enough time on either your schedule or your sales team schedule to manage those really large accounts, because they do take a lot of time and a lot of effort. All right. So let's just talk a little bit deeper about, um, you know, establishing that credibility. Um, it's interesting if we start in the public relations world. Um, a lot of technology companies, they think they're too young, or they don't think that they have much to say in terms of public relations. They're not really sure about how to manage that. And my advice to clients typically is, don't leave that off of your product marketing mix or your marketing strategies. Um, you know, it's, in my experience, has been worth it to pay for public relations expertise, right? Talking to people, services, agencies that can open the door with writers and magazines, whether they're online or, you know, still in print. Um, I worked at a company that had 15 US employees, but it had an enormous presence in the cybersecurity marketplace, because they were very effective in how they used public relations. And so the perception was that they were a much, much bigger company than the 15 US employees and the 60 employees they had in Israel. And so they established a partnership with Microsoft. At first, they were just a product partner with Microsoft, one of thousands of product partners that Microsoft had. But they convinced Microsoft that the security technology for cloud applications was unique and Microsoft didn't have it and Microsoft needed it. So Microsoft said, instead of partnering with you, we're just going to buy you. And they came up with an outrageously rich offer. And the senior management of the company took that offer to their board, and their board, could have waited and made more money, but they, took the money and sold the company to Microsoft. And the company had only been in business for 24 months. So a really young company, but well managed, well structured, with the perception in the marketplace of a much, much bigger company than they were in reality. My role there was to establish the partner program. So we went around and we signed up 20 partners in about a 4-month period. And we had some of the really largest, most well-known partners in the cybersecurity business in the United States. And having those partners on our website, in our presentations, gave people, again, the perception that we were much bigger in terms of, sales and strength than we actually were with the small number of people we had in the US. The second way to build credibility, and this is, a way if you don't even have a budget, is to build up your cadre or your collection of influencers. And the term influencer to me is kind of a consumer term, kind of a TikTok term. But in the business world, it's really not that difficult to find, first of all, and then create a group of influencers for specific technologies. So for my clients, we've created groups of influencers in the virtual CIO world or the virtual CISO world for security products. And so we've created, a few hundred members of our community, and within those communities have influencers that then can spread the word about the vendor products that we're selling and why their technology is better and why it's more interesting and why it's unique. And again, this can be done on a almost zero budget. It's just a matter of spending the time on LinkedIn to collect those relationships, build the relationships, and then message out to those groups and those communities. Branding is always important, but again, it sometimes gets overlooked, right? I go on sales calls and all I hear is, features, 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 function features. And there's really not much thought given to the actual brand of the company. Is it consistent? Do you look like you're a professional company, right? If your color scheme, your images, your icons are inconsistent, then you're going to look like a small, kind of unprofessional company. So in the partnering world, the being consistent with your branding is quite valuable because companies want to partner with strong brands, with well-managed, well-run brands. And, doing it yourself, again, sometimes can be, you're forced into it because of cost, but to spend a little bit of money and have a very consistent brand across your websites and your collateral and your reports and your presentations is definitely, worth the time and worth the small amount of money. And then we've talked about the partnerships and how having bigger partners definitely adds to your credibility. The one tool 2 years ago were all these trust sites, so the G2s and the Capterras of the world. And what's happened since the previous presentation is the price of those participating with those companies has gone up and up and up. So now for a small company, it's pretty big investment to put down to be working with multiple of those places to work with. The clients I work with sometimes will choose one of them, get as good a rating as possible, and then advertise that rating from one of these apps In the old days, 2, 3 years ago, you could go on 3 or 4 of them, get good ratings for not very much money, and then be able to advertise, all of their little logos um, on your website and on your presentations. So with that, I'm going to take a breath and see if there are any questions about any of this material. And I don't see any in the chat, and I
None
don't
in-
see any hands up. All right, I'm going to keep going. So part of the calculation about partnerships is to run the numbers. You want to be able to calculate from a couple perspectives. So what is the partner, if you're in the partner's shoes or wearing the partner hat, what are they getting out of it, right? Typically today, they're not making very much money in terms of margin of reselling product. So what they have to do is they have to make money on the services. So you have to understand the services that your product is going to generate, the complementary sales that your product is going to pull along or pull through, right? So can you pull through different vendors' products? And if so, if you can pull through multiple vendors' products, then those vendor products become instant partners, right? Reaching out to them and talking to them and saying, by the way, if we bundle or if I pull through your products, right, you should help me do that. And if you can convince them or demonstrate to them that that's the case, or if you can find a customer or a reseller, for example, that will attest to the value of both your products together, your argument becomes much stronger, much more convincing. Um, and you can sign up and get some traction with those large bundling partners. There is a question about creative partnerships. For small companies, I've seen attempts to do creative partnerships. So to partner kind of outside your market vertical, to partner with companies that, are well-known, good brands, but they don't specifically talk to your very narrow market niche. Um, and so most of the success I've seen is really focused on a very narrow set of users, a set of use cases, and to focus in on partners that are familiar with those, market niches, those customers. Um, yes, you may get some, you know, traction or a little bit of attention from, a large newspaper because you bought a full page ad, but that sort of attention is very short-lived, and it's not going to drive anything other than um, you know a little bit of attention on the short term that those presentations or that advertising's done. That the key to these partnerships is one, that you're consistently working them. So you're touching these people once a week, twice a week, on a regular basis. You have their commitment, right, to produce. You give them, training and guidelines and milestones to hit, right, and then you hold them accountable for that. And so it's an ongoing, relationship. It's not just, talk to them once and then a month later show up again and then, ask them what they've done. Um, it does take, constant work. And that constant work is difficult because you've got lots of other things on your plate asking for your time or requiring your time. So, just be aware that, building these partner relationships are time consuming. And so being creative or working with partners that aren't going to lead to very specific and quantifiable benefits can be kind of a time sink. So you want to just be careful that you still remain focused as a small company. Moving along,
Bef-
a
Before,
couple of case studies. Um,
Steve, I have a question.
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I'm just wondering, in terms of some of the partnerships that I've experienced teams starting off with, I think in the back of their mind, they're thinking this could be potential acquisition territory, kind of getting sucked into whatever that partner's doing and maybe a way to exit. Uh, in your experience, should those conversations happen up front when you're building relationships with partners, or are those better saved down the line? Is it something that should be addressed and approached right away? Or like, is it a bad thing to do that?
Well, so there are a couple things in answer to that question. I've seen, structuring those strategic partnerships as a way of kind of dating. So you get to know them, they get to know you. If your product moves for them, if their salespeople can sell your product, then yes, they're more in tune to buy. You get a sense for their culture, they get a sense for yours. Um, so that's typically the place and kind of the behavior of doing that. For as many times as I've seen that work, I've seen plenty of cases where the smaller company, the startup company was, interested and excited and said, oh, these guys are going to buy us. And the larger parent company, for whatever reason, and it could have nothing to do and completely out of the control of the emerging company, decided that, a relationship was fine. You don't need to pursue an acquisition. Um, and so the acquisition never went anywhere. And the emerging company ended up, a little disappointed that they'd put a lot of time and effort into the relationship and it didn't work out. You know, I guess the analogy is kind of dating, right? You want it to work out, you want it to be successful in the long term, but it doesn't always work out that way.
I guess
Um,
my question is, so then in terms of communication, would you like advise having those conversations early? I mean, if we keep with the dating analogy, some people date one are like, I want kids and I want to live in a mansion and I want you to, they have these ideas of where they would like that relationship to go. And is that something that you would suggest early stage teams to include upfront, so that maybe they don't end up wasting a huge amount of invested time and energy and it not end up in a way that they are interested in?
yeah, I would say keep those discussions separate. If you want to get bought, then have a discussion about getting bought. If your real interest is to have a partnership for revenue and sales generation and credibility reasons, stick to those goals and stick to the behavior that's going to get you there. Um, Being upfront and telling a partner that you want them to buy you typically doesn't work out terribly well. And part of that reason is because um, you're sort of reducing your negotiation perspective or the value in a negotiation, um, because you're sort of telling them that the only reason you want to work with them is because you want them to acquire you. Every situation is different. It may work out that if you show up in the first day and you say, we're forming this partnership, and if it works out, you're going to acquire us. That's our goal. And we will work through milestones to get there. But at the end of those milestones, um, if we do the things we say we're going to do and you sell enough of our product, then, we're going to consider the acquisition. Um, the acquiring company still has the ability to say no, and they can still say no because they don't have the cash, they don't have the board of that acquiring company is not on board to do that. There could be 50 different reasons why that acquisition doesn't work out and doesn't go through. And you've sort of exposed yourself if you bring that up, too early in that process.
That makes a lot of
I hope,
sense.
yeah, I hope that helps. Um, couple of cases where really small companies, like Guideline was much, much smaller than Intuit, but Intuit owned the public accounting market, and Guideline was a 401k product. So it was just a really a good fit. Intuit needed what Guideline was offering. That's a case where Guideline could have been purchased by Intuit, um, and maybe still might. And Intuit just had so many really good, attractive leads for Guideline that it was just a huge strategic success for Guideline. Guideline went from a few thousand clients to 50,000 clients by working through Intuit. So it was like a 5x, 10x, 15x growth by driving that strategic partnership. The Mooksoft was a small AI ops company, so they're using AI to analyze networks. Orange Business Services, a global system integrator in Europe, North America, and part of um, the success there was providing Orange Business Systems a new technology so they could take that new technology and go into their really large clients, and then just being very dogged every week about providing uh, more sales calls, more webinars, more marketing, um, and just being all over Orange Business Services so that they just couldn't ignore the Moogsoft sales and marketing activity. The Adelome and Microsoft, this is the case I talked about where Adelome was such a small US company. They invested in the Microsoft partnership. A lot of people would say, I'm not going to invest my time and effort into working with Microsoft because they're so large that it's not going to really lead to uh, sales because the Microsoft sales teams, the Microsoft distributors just won't give the time of day to a tiny little company like Adelome. But the Adelome senior management were smart and they invested lots of time and lots of money into the relationship with Microsoft, and eventually it paid off. Um, One of the challenges, though, and one of the pitfalls you should be very careful about is if you're partnering with a large organization, or even if you're selling to a large organization, having them turn around and ask for more features. Like, can you please add these features to your product? Um, you know, we need more of this. Um, we need a different platform. We need a different integration. We need you to add, this whole new set of multi-tenancy, whatever it happens to be. And then the small emerging company becomes beholden to the large brand. And whether they're an investor or a partner, the small company has to be able to say no at strategic and really important decisions, um, and just say, sorry, we can't stick to our business model if you're going to take us down these side streets. And we can't take our development team and shift them all over to the features that you want and take us away from our core market. So I've seen that happen a lot, particularly companies like Cisco is the one that I was familiar with. Just completely pulled about half of a engineering team over to produce features that they wanted, and it delayed the product roadmap, it delayed releases, and it caused a lot of problems over a 5 or 6 year period for a company that I worked for in the past. So the communities that I've been most effective with are on Slack and LinkedIn. There are already groups out there of different users, of different, developers. And so finding those groups and meeting those people, creating relationships with those folks, um, are all great ways to gather information, find leads, find potential good partners within those organizations, Um, and they're all out there. They're all just sitting there waiting to be talked to. The other organizations are fractional executives. So if you're selling to IT people, sell to the fractional CIOs or the fractional CISOs or the fractional CTOs. They are out there. They're in communities. Meeting them and talking to them is actually much easier than talking to a full-time CIO who has a job, right? And a fractional CIO is going to want to bring new technologies into their clients, particularly if there's a quick win they can get, because a fractional person wants to get in, get a quick win, bring a solution to their clients, and show their worth, right, in a very short period of time. So the sales cycles can be compressed if a fractional CIO goes in and says, you need this product and you need it right away. So if you're selling business to consumer, then you're more interested in the Facebooks and the Twitters of the world or the X's of the world. This particular slide is old because it still has Clubhouse on there. And I don't know many people that still use Clubhouse. And I could be wrong. Maybe you guys do.
We have a
Um,
question, a hand raised, Juha.
Go ahead, Juha. What's your question?
Juha, are you there?
You're probably on mute. So feel free to come off mute or type it in the chat, either way.
He's off mute, but maybe he's having trouble with his audio. Juha, if you're talking, we cannot hear you or see you for that matter. Let's see.
All
We'll
right.
come back. We'll circle
We'll,
back.
we'll come back. Um, so here's an exercise that you all should do if you haven't done it already, and you probably are way ahead of me and have already done it. But identifying your ideal customer profile, and this gets really complex if you are dealing with large organizations. So if you're selling to global 2000 companies or even 500 employees to 5,000 employees, understanding who the players are in your sale, and your sale gets a lot more complex as you go up market. And then figuring out what their not just goals are, but also the kind of their emotions. Like what are they scared of, right? What does a victory look like to them? And if you go through this exercise, um, and you come up with, written messages, first message, second message, in terms of, how do you reach out to them? How do you gain a relationship with them? Once you have all this information, from this information then flows your ideal partner profile. So in the partner world, we call it the IPP. But one of the questions you'll ask is, okay, for each of these various personas, who are the people that talk to them? Where do they get their information? Who are the influencers of those people? And sometimes that's written material, sometimes it's website. Um, okay, here's the question from Juha coming in. But to finish out this thought, your IPP should flow kind of the same way from this document, and you should be able to answer similar questions. So for your ideal partner, what do they care about? They probably care about services. They care about raising revenue. They care about providing cool new technology for their clients because they want to be the thought leaders, the technology leaders for their clients. And so if you can provide that to them, then they will bring you into their clients and open up new opportunities. So that for me has been very effective, being the cool new technology on the street. All right, switching over to Juha. What is the nature of the partnership between Intuit and Guideline? What did Guideline do for Intuit or vice versa? Okay, so Guideline was a 401k provider for small to mid-sized businesses. Well, not even mid-sized, small businesses, right? And Intuit was the number one accounting and tax for small businesses. So they had tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands probably, small little businesses, little restaurants and retail businesses and barber shops and restaurants and the whole bit. And all of those little businesses were interested, maybe not all, but a lot of them, a lot of those little businesses were interested in getting a 401k retirement program for their owners, because their owners were very interested, but also for some of their employees who said, hey, I need a retirement plan. And so Guideline or Intuit didn't have anything like that. They didn't have the structure, they didn't have the legal, they didn't have the systems to do that. So Guideline was a really good kind of add-on to um, Intuit's customer base, a value-added product that Intuit could say, hey, if you want a retirement plan, here's a way to do it that's fast, easy, relatively inexpensive, and let me introduce you to the Guideline person. What did Guideline get out of it? Guideline got, as I said, tens of thousands of customers, Intuit customers who were just doing their accounting and needed more from that relationship. So from that perspective, it was a really a good fit in terms of both uh, sides getting something of value from that particular partnership. Intuit got the customers locked in. They came off looking great because they provided extra, value add to their customers. Their customers were doing their accounting for their 401ks in the Intuit products. So they were, even stickier to Intuit, more loyal to Intuit by doing business with Guideline. So I hope that answers that question. All right. So let's move on to the latest and the greatest in the world, um, and that's the Gen AI. So part of what we've done is to create a custom GPTs. And I said, okay, let's create a custom GPT to build partners. And so I said, let's create a Viterbi tool to do it. And so I went to the tool and added some prompts in there. And there's no reason why you couldn't do the same in just a matter of minutes for your business. And one of the nice things about it is it will help you generate the strategy. It'll help you generate the program, but it'll also help you generate the content. So in terms of who do you want to talk to and what do you want to say to them, you can generate blogs, LinkedIn posts, advertising, tear sheets, web pages, all of them from the same collection of content that you're using, to generate your messages out to your customers. So let me take a pause real quick because Alex has a question. The best way to figure out who to talk to in an organization to establish a partnership. That is a great question. A great, great question. Large organizations in particular, sometimes it's really difficult to figure out who to talk to. And yes, they have people in a partner organization. They have somebody who has a title of Director of Partnerships or VP of Partnerships or Chief Partnership Officer. But sometimes those aren't the best people to talk to because their plates are full of various partner relationships that they're trying to have. So sometimes the people you want to talk to are not necessarily in the partner world, but they align with the technology that you have that aligns with their technology. So in a case, a few years back, I was working for a voice over IP company, and we wanted a relationship with a really large, well-known security vendor, cybersecurity vendor. So we started out not with their partnership team, but with their product team. So we went to their product managers and we said, hey, we need your security products for our voice over IP system. And if we can put these two products together and create joint messaging, then it's going to benefit both of us. You will get a benefit because you will be able to say to people, you can protect voice over IP. We'll get a benefit because we'll be able to say that we have a more secure product because we're partnered with that other company. And so we started with the product managers. The product managers then went over to the partner organization and said, hey, this is a good company. They have great technology. We want to partner with them. We want to be the sponsor of that partnership. And so we worked with both them and the partner organization to produce training materials and collateral. And then what happened was we ended up on stage because we won Partner of the Year because we had done all of our homework and we had done, we're able to talk to customers and generate customer business for them in a market that they hadn't been in, which was the voice over IP space, voice over IP market. So the instructions are pretty straightforward. You guys probably know how to use ChatGPT better than I do, or maybe you're using Microsoft Copilot, but it's relatively similar. You ask it to generate these things for you. You tell it what you want to do. You ask it for its advice and its guidance on building your strategy. You ask it for 10 questions that you should ask of any potential partner, and it will, spit it back out to you. Now, of course, anytime you use any of this, you need to be careful, right? You need to make sure that the information that it's giving you is accurate and it's not hallucinating. But the more you can input into it, like your website and your collateral and influencers and all those kinds of things, the more accurate information you're going to get. If you ask it pretty generic questions and you ask it for statistics, you know, my experience is it will make stuff up. And I was speaking on a webinar and I asked it to pull some, statistics on that particular webinar. And it gave me, 10 statistics and 8 out of the 10 were completely made up. So just, be careful. But in terms of text, um, we've had great results creating strategies, programs, and initiatives for partnership development for our clients. A couple of underhanded is probably not the right terminology, but lesser known tips and tricks. Um, all of these have been effective for us. Meeting people on webinars, in the chat area on the webinar, like you guys are doing today, has been, very effective, very useful. Meeting people on LinkedIn, I've had great luck creating new relationships and productive, valuable relationships just by people I've reached out to and met on LinkedIn. Um, understanding who your competitors are and beating a competitor and then telling the partner that you've beat a particular competitor can be very, very effective in terms of getting that particular partner to want to do business with you. So, we've done that a few times where we went to a partner, told them we were going to beat them. They said, sorry, we can't leave another vendor. You then beat them because you have a better technology. You go back to that initial partner and say, see, we told you we're going to beat you. Are you ready to work with us now? And, by that time, once you demonstrate your superiority, the partners will sign up. And once that sort of mythology gets out into the marketplace and gets told and retold as a story, it becomes very, very, very useful. Taking the coffee, this is an old tip from an old sales guy who basically would show up somewhere and uh, people would offer him, something to drink, a cup of coffee, and he would always walk with them to the coffee room because you never know who he was going to meet in the coffee room. So he would meet the CFOs or the CEOs in the coffee room, and he would either be introduced or introduce himself. And he was able to establish really effective relationships by whoever he met in the coffee room or on the way to the coffee room. Um, and it turned out that, it was just great advice that he was providing. Helpful resources, pretty straightforward. Um, if you guys aren't using Blue Seedling or you haven't looked at Unusual Ventures, Some really good written material there. If you're focused on lead generation, Promonio and Duck Soup are, great tools to do forecasting and some lead gen. And then also just, if you're looking for partners, using the tools on LinkedIn is a relatively easy way to find and reach out to specific people who could be your partners. Folks like Jay McBain have long lists of newsletters that they put out about partnering, and they publish lists of partners. So if you're looking for particular types of partners or particular influencers, it's likely that the different partner analyst organizations have already printed those. If you're looking for lists of MSPs or MSSPs, they're already out there. They've already been printed. It's just a matter of going to get them. And with that, I'm going to wrap up and open up for questions. We did use almost the whole hour. I didn't mean to talk so much, but sorry about that. There's my number. There's my email. Feel free to reach out. Ask me any follow-up questions. So with that, I'm going to take a breath. So go ahead, guys.
I love how you apologized for doing the presentation we all signed up to participate in, Steve. I actually do. I have some questions, but so, okay, you did talk a little bit about how it's a huge time commitment, this relationship development, and oftentimes it might lead to not very, huge benefits down the line, especially if what you're looking for is acquisition. Are there other things that teams should be weary of aside from, things I'm thinking about are, stuff that I've heard of, or at least fears that I've heard of that I don't know are substantiated, like in these partnerships, these organizations may be learning and reverse engineering the technology of the partner, or even on the flip side, a partner suggesting that they have the technical capabilities to maybe integrate your solution, but they don't. And now you're solving their business problems for them because, so that I feel like there are potential
Okay.
Advice that you can maybe give on that.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about risks. So what are the risks of the partnerships? Somebody stealing your technology, is that a risk? I haven't seen that a lot. I have seen it, but I haven't seen it a lot. I would say, if you're worried about it, get a one-page NDA and make sure everyone you're dealing with signs it. It's very simple to do these days. You can do it online. You can send it to people. They can sign it. Having an NDA in place is actually a deterrent. And you can remind people that, by the way, there is an NDA in place. The other thing that the NDA protects against is things like, sharing lead lists with other people. Um, that's valuable to have that in place. The risks, the other big risk is they're going to tell you they're going to do something and they never come through for you. And that solution really is to get senior management to buy in. Um, Make sure the senior management is fully committed to the partnership and the relationship. If they're not, then what you're going to maybe bump into is the the sales reps or the product people, the marketing people may be interested in working with you, but if their senior people aren't bought in and supportive, then you may not get their full attention or consistent attention. The other thing that has happened is you're working with a whole marketing team or a sales team, and there's a layoff, and there's not much you can do about that. You're sort of left high and dry, um, because the deals and the sales and the relationships that you'd gone and built up get sort of pulled out from under you. So those are sort of two risks that
Is
come to mind off the
there
bat.
a way around that last one? I've heard so many times, at least a handful from teams that were way down the kind of development cycle, and then their bastion in that organization goes on maternity leave or something. It's like just a totally unexpected loss of like that person who was advocating for them and getting them in the right places and in the meetings. Is there any way to avoid that, or a contingent, like, in your opinion?
Yeah. So you definitely want to create that champion, right? So you're talking about your champion going away. And so I've had situations where we had a great champion in a place and they helped us immensely all over the place. They passionately sold our product inside their organization. And then they found a job somewhere else and they left. And so having multiple champions um, is helpful. Or if you lose your champion because they leave or retire, you immediately have to get in there and create a new champion and figure out who has the control and the sway within the company that convinces other people that they should take a look at your technology. And so we've done that too, where champions left and we scurried around to create a new champion as quickly as we possibly could so we didn't lose any of that momentum. So yeah, you're absolutely right. That does happen.
It's so painful too when it does.
Oh, it does. Ooh, it is.
I don't see any more questions in the chat. So unless anyone has a burning question before we log off, I'll give a beat. I would like to then use this time to end our Oceanside chat by thanking you again, Steve, for coming in and doing such a great chat. Like I said at the beginning, I don't think we talk about partnerships enough. Strategic
Yeah.
partnerships specifically. I think the hardest thing is just, startup founders at an early stage are busy doing so many things that they can kind of put partnerships a little bit on the back burner. They're trying to
They do
book
that.
meetings, they're trying to get their first customers, they're going to market, they're doing all these things that keep the business operating internally, but they really don't think like maybe how they could leverage the support of someone who's already doing it much better than them and kind of
Yeah.
siphon that from them.
Well, so the last thing I guess I would say is if you are careful and thoughtful, your partnerships don't have to be that taxing. They don't have to be an everyday, or even an every week situation if you have the right committed partners. So that's definitely something you want to build into your plan and your equation is, who can you work with? We do have a question about the recording. I guess,
Oh yeah, I record and send these out. You'll find it on that library that I shared in the chat. Thanks for asking. And then Steve, if you are interested in sharing your deck, not a requirement, I can also put that.
yeah, sure. I'll email it over to you this afternoon. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate you sharing your lunchtime with me. Have a good one. Take care. Bye-bye, everybody.